The stained glass windows glowed in the evening sun, casting halos across the polished wood of the pastor's private study. For decades, the mansion behind Redemption Hill Church stood as a symbol of grace, of trust, of a shepherd's devotion to his flock. But beneath the floorboards, behind a bookcase sealed for years, was a room no one was ever supposed to find. And when police officers finally broke it open, what they uncovered didn't just destroy a reputation. It shattered the very foundation of faith in an entire town. Before we dive deeper, ask yourself, would you still believe in God if the man who baptized your children had buried something evil beneath his home? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. At first glance, Pastor Elijah Whitmore was everything a small town prayed for. Charismatic, handsome, mid-50s, African-American, always in a crisp black suit and silver tie. His voice, smooth as silk, with just the right amount of thunder when he preached. He didn't just lead sermons, but he orchestrated them. For over 20 years, he built Redemption Hill Church from a dying corner chapel into a spiritual empire. Sunday services were standing room only. People drove across counties just to sit in the back pew. His face was on billboards, his voice filled local radio. He baptized babies, buried elders, and even helped ex-cons find jobs. But his greatest accomplishment, the towering white brick manse behind the church, known to locals simply as the House of Grace. It wasn't just a residence, it was a symbol. Donated land, volunteer labor, community-funded, room by room. A place where troubled teens came for counseling, where couples received premarital advice, where widows gathered for prayer circles, a beacon. And inside that house lived Pastor Elijah, his wife Clarissa, and their quiet teenage daughter Naomi. Clarissa was a picture of poise, former gospel singer, always hosting luncheons, welcoming visitors, organizing women's retreats. Naomi, she was different, bookish, withdrawn, rarely spoke, but polite, obedient, always trailing behind her mother in long dresses and solemn eyes. For years they were the town's royal family of righteousness. But then, strange things started happening. It began subtly. Naomi stopped attending youth ministry. People said she had health issues, but no one ever saw her at the clinic. A custodian noticed that one wing of the mansion, the eastern side, was always locked. He was told it was storage, nothing more. Then one Sunday, a choir member swore she saw bruises on Naomi's wrist as the girl handed out communion. The pastor's wife insisted she'd tripped down the garden stairs. No one asked further. Because in Redemption Hill, you didn't question Pastor Whitmore until the night the sirens came. After the sirens came that night, Redemption Hill would never be the same. But before the flashing lights and the police tape, before the media vans lined up outside the mansion, there were signs, small ones, quiet ones, the kind you only recognize in hindsight, when the truth has already torn through your life like a storm. It began with Naomi's silence. Church members said she was reserved, but it wasn't shyness. It was something colder, numb, hollow, like she was watching the world through a glass wall. You could wave, but she never waved back. She walked like someone counting steps, not living in them. At potlucks, she sat alone. At Bible study, she stared at the pages but never turned them. Her teachers at Redemption Academy said she always turned in perfect homework, but never once raised her hand. And still, no one asked, because Pastor Elijah said she was going through a spiritual transition. And when the man of God speaks, who dares to contradict him? But the mansion began to hum with rumors. A plumber, called to fix a pipe leak in the kitchen, claimed he heard muffled crying from inside the east wing. When he mentioned it, Clarissa smiled sweetly and said, "That's just the pipes, dear. They groan in the winter." He never came back. Then there was the realtor's assistant, a young woman named Denise. She stopped by the mansion once for a property valuation update and accidentally walked through the wrong door. The study, where Pastor Elijah usually met with couples. Except, the room was freezing cold. No air conditioning was on. She said there was a large rug in the middle of the floor, but one edge was awkwardly curled up, like it was covering something. Before she could look closer, Naomi appeared in the doorway. She didn't say a word, just stood there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if she wanted to say something. But then Pastor Elijah appeared behind her, smiling. "Denise, the wife's waiting for you out front. I'll take it from here." And just like that, Naomi was gone again, like a shadow that only shows when the light is wrong. Weeks passed, and then came the packages. The UPS guy said they were oddly labelled, heavy, unmarked brown boxes with no return address, delivered directly to the East Wing entrance. He joked with Clarissa once, "Whatever y'all are ordering sure weighs like cement." She didn't laugh, she just stared. And inside those boxes, no one knew, not yet. But the final clue came from Ms. Hargrove, the retired librarian. She had once been Naomi's reading mentor when the girl was in 6th grade. Now nearly blind, she still volunteered to help catalogue the church's archive room. She came in one rainy Thursday afternoon and asked Clarissa if Naomi would like to come help her sort old hymnals. Clarissa's answer chilled her to the bone. Naomi doesn't handle old books very well anymore. She sees things in them. The librarian never returned to the mansion again. If you were part of that church and you saw these signs, would you have spoken up, or would you have stayed quiet like everyone else? Comment your answer, because it's easy to spot evil after it's been caught. It's harder to see it when it's wearing a pastor's robe. The first real fracture in the Whitmore illusion didn't come from a sermon. It came from a scent. Cherise Daniels, a volunteer who cleaned the church once a week, said she'd started smelling formaldehyde every time she vacuumed the back hallway of the mansion. At first she thought maybe it was Clarissa's lotions. The woman always wore expensive perfumes. But one day the smell was so sharp it made her dizzy. She knocked on the eastern wing door, just to check. But no one answered. She called out for Naomi. Silence. So she turned the handle. It didn't budge. The door had been replaced, a heavy, steel-reinforced industrial type. Nothing like the other vintage wood doors in the house. From that moment on, Cherise started to suspect. But the betrayal wouldn't be hers to uncover. It would come, heartbreakingly, from Naomi herself. For weeks, Naomi had been writing something. A counsellor at Redemption Academy, who remained anonymous later, said Naomi had left a folded note in the school's prayer box, the kind students used for anonymous spiritual requests. The note read, "If you find this, I'm not crazy. There's a place in our house no one talks about. My father calls it the room. My mother says God told them to build it. But God doesn't live in that room. Something else does." At first they thought it was a prank, but the handwriting matched Naomi's. Still, they did nothing. Until Naomi ran. On a Tuesday afternoon, Clarissa called the police and reported Naomi missing. She said she'd gone out to pick up books at the library but never came home. The town sprang into action. Volunteers spread out. Flyers were printed. Search dogs deployed. But 3 days later, Naomi walked into the Henderson County Police Department by herself. Her face was pale, her dress torn at the hem, her wrists raw from what appeared to be rope burns. The officer at the front desk said she didn't cry, didn't stutter. She just said, "My parents are not who you think they are. There's a room in our house. I'll take you there." What they found was the first betrayal, not of the town, not of the faith, but of a child, by the two people who were supposed to protect her most. Imagine your child walks into a police station alone and tells them there's a hidden room in your home that no one knows about. What would they find if it were your house? Drop a in the comments if you're still watching, because this is where everything starts to fall apart. The moment Naomi Whitmore stepped into the police station with her torn dress and trembling voice, the mask cracked. But what was behind it wasn't just disturbing, it was unholy. By morning, 2 police cruisers, a child welfare officer and one silent detective named Kendrick Voss followed Naomi back to Redemption Hill's most untouchable landmark, the mansion that the entire town had helped build. Clarissa met them at the door. She smiled like it was Sunday service, asked if they'd like tea. But when she saw Naomi behind the detective, her face changed, flat, cold, and calculated. Naomi didn't flinch. She walked straight to the east wing, down the narrow hall past the guest rooms, and stood in front of that steel-reinforced door. No one had touched it in years, but Naomi had the key. From her sock, she slid it in, turned the lock. The sound it made, that metallic groan, would haunt every officer who heard it. Inside, not a prayer room, not a panic room, but something far more sinister. A single bare bulb swung from the ceiling, casting long shadows over a concrete floor. Thick metal chains hung from wall bolts, not rusted, recently cleaned. In one corner, a small mattress, stained and sunken in. In another, a camera tripod with a missing lens. The walls were lined with shelves of cassette tapes, unmarked, just numbers written in Sharpie. But the worst part? The smell. Not of blood, not of decay, but of formaldehyde. And something else. Something chemical, like preservation fluid. Detective Voss said it best. This wasn't just a room, it was a studio, a ritual, a crime scene built to be repeated. They began cataloguing everything, box after box of tapes, some dating back over a decade. Medical-grade restraints, a ledger with initials, dates, a column marked cleansed, and hidden beneath a false bottom in a cabinet, 3 sealed glass jars, each containing what appeared to be strands of hair, different colours, different lengths. And then they found the name, a bracelet, plastic, like one given in hospitals or birthing wards. It read, Naomi W., 5 lbs, 8 Oz, 1 to 12, 09. She hadn't seen it before, she'd never worn it, and her mother had told her she was born at home. Detectives immediately detained Clarissa and ordered the arrest of Pastor Elijah Whitmore, who had conveniently left town that morning for a leadership retreat. His phone went dark, his GPS disabled, and somewhere between the Georgia state line and the Florida panhandle, the man vanished. For the next 2 days, Redemption Hill stood still. Congregants held prayer vigils. Some defended their pastor. There must be a misunderstanding. Others quietly began removing his portrait from their living rooms. But the investigators weren't done, because in one of the shelves behind a false drywall panel, they found a second door. No key, just 4 rusted bolts. When they opened it, there was no light, only a staircase winding downward. They were no longer inside a house. They were inside a tomb that someone had built into a sanctuary. But what they would find at the bottom would not only destroy the myth of Pastor Elijah Whitmore, it would shake the entire town and become a story whispered about in documentaries, podcasts, and criminal psychology classrooms for years. At this point, ask yourself, if you lived next door to that mansion, would you have noticed the silence behind the east wing? Would you have dared to knock? Comment your thoughts and stay with us, because what comes next will unearth the final betrayal and the truth Naomi was never supposed to remember. The stairs were older than the house. That's what the forensic team would later confirm. Hand-poured concrete, likely laid decades before the mansion was ever constructed. And they led down, not into a basement, but into a chamber that defied logic. Detective Voss held his breath as the last step groaned under his boots. Flashlights flickered against peeling walls, revealing crucifixes, not hung, but carved. Hundreds of them, all facing inward toward a makeshift altar covered in mildew and wax. Behind it, etched into the stone, were 5 names, all girls, all missing, and all listed on a corkboard back at the precinct under unrelated disappearances. At the center of the chamber was a wooden crib. Inside it, preserved in an airtight glass casing, was a child's dress. White, delicate, unworn. Beside it, a cassette, numbered 01. They played it back at the station. It wasn't a sermon. It was Elijah Whitmore's voice, soft, calm, almost tender, reciting what sounded like scripture. But it wasn't scripture. It was a ritual, a mantra. In silence she was given. In silence she shall remain until the sins of her womb are cleansed. No one understood it, except Naomi. Back at the station, Naomi sat across from a trauma specialist, her knees pulled to her chest. She wasn't speaking, not until they showed her the hospital bracelet again. "Naomi, were you ever told how you were born?" She didn't blink. "My mother said I was born during a thunderstorm, that the power went out, that angels sang." "Was she there?" A long pause. Then Naomi whispered, "No." She said God brought me after the other girl died. That was it. The other girl, the town's most quietly whispered tragedy, Maya Ellis, 15 years old, vanished in 2008 after a church revival. Never found, never solved, except now they knew why, because Naomi was Maya's daughter. Elijah Whitmore had been grooming Maya. Church records confirmed she was pulled into spiritual mentorship the year she disappeared. No one suspected anything, not when he called it God's sanctification. When Maya became pregnant, she was hidden, isolated in that mansion, until childbirth. Then, silence. Maya was never seen again. But Naomi, she was raised under lies, told she was a gift, a miracle. A child born not out of love, but control. The arrest made national news. Elijah Whitmore was caught hiding in a cabin near Ocala, Florida, using a fake name and an expired church ID. He was returned to Henderson County in shackles. Clarissa pleaded guilty to obstruction and child endangerment, claiming she had no idea about the full extent. But her fingerprints were on the tapes, on the ledger, on Naomi's crib. She was sentenced to 22 years. Elijah? Life without parole. But Naomi walked free. And she never went back to Redemption Hill. Instead, she changed her name, moved north, started college, and used the money from a victims fund to create a non-profit called Room 1 for girls who were never given a choice. They tore the mansion down, every brick, not for redevelopment, but because no one, not even the most devout, could stomach driving past what had become known as the house with Room 1. Some say they still hear hymns at night where it used to stand. Others say nothing at all. Because in towns like Henderson, forgetting is easier than remembering what evil wears behind the mask of holiness. But Naomi never forgot. And neither should we. So what do you think? Did Naomi's justice come too quietly? Should Clarissa have been punished more harshly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story left you breathless, wait until you hear the next one, about the woman who walked into a wedding with a flash drive and walked out with every secret the groom had ever buried. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss what's coming next.